Samir Adam, Senior Vice President of ACIA. Whose idea was it to join with Universal?
Well, it was a collective decision. We've been looking at our commercial strategy for the next few years and how we see the requirements of the market, how we see the demands of not only the traveling public but also the operators. And as we explore the various technologies, we have identified that universal hydrogen is a strong player in the market, and we see an opportunity to work with them, particularly on the focus on the turboprops. We also see an opportunity for the diverse approach that they're taking with both major turboprop platforms. So ideally, we would like to be able to cover both sides of the large turboprop segment, and in our management discussions, it made sense to take a look at how are we going to approach with universal hydrogen our plans to improve and enhance the sustainability factors that are going to affect our fleet decisions. Yeah. So really it was a collective management decision looking to move forward on that.
But in another interview, Mick Mooney explained his growth strategy, the ACIA growth strategy. Do you want to be disruptive as a lessor by having a fleet with hydrogen-based aircraft?
So I think by nature of how ACIA operates, we're somewhat disruptive without intentionally being so. We're not a traditional lessor. We certainly have some aspects around the ACMI operation with our sister companies. We have the inherent experience around the conversions that come from IPRC as well. So we are not in line with a traditional lessor already. When we look at something like a partnership with Universal Hydrogen, this is really looking at how our fleet will grow for the next foreseeable future, but at the same time it has to be something that makes commercial sense for all parties. And when I say all parties, it also means that the operators and the passenger and the traveling public and the airports, all those stakeholders have to take a look at what is the issue of the day today and how we're going to solve that issue tomorrow. And I think that's really the approach that matters here.
Yeah. Which if you lease a traditional ATR on jet fuel, that's easy. You can go to an airline and say, hey, here it is. Now you first have to convert the aircraft to hydrogen. It needs certification. Well, that is something that might be solved. But it's first an investment for you before you can lease it out. How does it affect lease rates? Will they be going up for a hydrogen aircraft in the future?
So that's a good question. I think what we're actually trying to look at here, rather than the upward impact on a lease rate, is more so as what are the costs of not doing anything. So the costs associated with staying with traditional combustion engine, or the impacts to the operators who cannot take those lease decisions because effectively we've inhibited the ability for them to progress and meet those particular regulatory requirements or environmental requirements. So it's really trying to stay at the forefront, if you will, and in this case we're actually trying to lead the change and lead the ideology around how the lessors and stakeholders work together to be able to develop those technologies and make them realistic. The approach with universal hydrogen, it goes beyond than just converting the powertrain. We're talking about logistics. We're talking about how do we work together as a lessor and as the service provider and universal hydrogen. So, it's a broader approach. It's not just change the airplane and find a lessee. It's really bringing a total solution that's going to make a step change in terms of sustainability. Yeah.
But do you know what it takes in the amount of money to convert an aircraft from jet fuel to hydrogen, and how many millions are involved in this?
I mean, it's not a small investment by any means. It's certainly significant, but these are aspects that are still under development. And as the development continues, those costs will be refined and they'll become commercially viable. So I think that's really what we are facing right now. We are at that first stage of the commitment aspect. We're talking about how we're going to strategize and work together and approach the market. And then we're going to actually go and work on the commercial aspects that'll make this a commercially viable solution for the operator.
But you said significant investment. Can you specify this?
Well, I mean, today, if you had to go replace an engine, you're still in a couple $1 million. So whether you're doing an overhaul or get a new replacement engine on for example, 127 engine on the ATR, it's a couple $1 million regardless. Yeah. So, this is not a heavily discounted solution. It's more of a sustainability solution that has to be at least somewhere around the break-even point. And that's really what all of the stakeholders in the industry are working towards.
Yeah. I still think you should do it as ACIA. That's the way ahead. It was mentioned here, COP26 in Glasgow this week. Climate change is the topic of the world right now. Aviation has to go this way.
I don't think it's actually an option, because the market, and you take a look at decisions recently, for example, Austrian Airlines, when they chose to get away from the Dash 8-400 a couple of years ago, that decision was based on a number of factors, including what is the sustainability scorecard of the aircraft at that time. And other operators had made similar decisions. There was an interesting campaign by KLM, for example, focusing on sustainability before the whole COVID situation unfolded. And Lufthansa was looking at something similar as well. So the major players have been looking at this and figuring out, how do we actually proceed and solve the problem, because the general public is demanding a solution. I would say that before COVID, really sustainability was a bit of a buzzword in aviation, and many conferences and discussion topics always talked about the fact that perhaps the major organizations supporting aviation were not keeping in step with what the general public's misconceptions were about sustainability. COVID gave us a chance to actually take a step back and all think a little bit about it, and put some time and effort into projects like these. And I think this is where you're actually seeing sustainability in aviation has become a forefront topic for most of the operators and the participants.
I heard during the press conference that you someone said hydrogen is more appropriate for the cargo version, for freighter, or than the passenger version. Why is that?
That's not really from a standpoint of where we're starting. We're starting with the cargo aircraft. That's why it's more appropriate for us. It's not really the intent to focus only on the cargo side. The long-term view here is going to be, how does our total fleet strategy evolve alongside some of the technologies like a universal hydrogen can bring to us. So that's really a broad-based approach for us, starting with the cargo, but progressing beyond that.
Thank you.